Hello everybody, it's Haj here. I think by now some of you already know that my main interest is wildlife photography, and in this particular genre of photography it is very easy to run out of reach, especially when you photograph little tiny birds. The solution is to get a longer focal length, but they are heavy and also pricey. The other solution would be to use a teleconverter like what I have here, and to use a crop sensor camera instead of a full frame camera. And sometimes you even ended up using the longest lens you have, put a teleconverter on the lens, use a crop sensor camera, and still do not have enough reach. And then you ended up doing crazy things like this guy in this video. That was completely useless, so forget about him. But anyway, back into this video's topic. The main question is there actually a difference between using a long focal length and teleconverters and crop sensor camera in terms of image properties, such as the perspective and the quality of the background or bokeh, and also image sharpness. So to test that, I impaled my good friend here in front of a jungle, and then I put a decorative Christmas light above his head. Then I stepped about 3 meters away from him and then taped myself on the ground, and then I started to shoot. Don't worry, it might sound bad, but actually nobody got hurt during this experiment. So when it comes to teleconverters, the answer is actually pretty straightforward. Teleconverters act as a focal length multipliers according to its power at a cost of a loss of light. A 1.4 teleconverter like this one will multiply then the focal length, as its name indicates, by 1.4 at the cost of 1 stop of light, while the 2 times teleconverter will multiply the focal length by 2 at the cost of a 2 stop of light. So first of all, we're gonna use this Nikon zoom lens 200 to 500 millimeters f5.6. Here is the image taken at 200 millimeters at f5.6 using a full frame camera. And now, while keeping the focal length at 200 millimeters, we attach the 1.4 teleconverter, and we got this image. If we look at the exe file of the image, we can see that indeed the focal length now becomes 280 millimeters, and the aperture value becomes f8. And here is an image taken with a full frame camera with the bare lens set at 280 millimeters f8. And indeed, they look exactly the same. Same thing as well once we attach the 2 times teleconverter, still keep then the focal length at 200 millimeters. We attach the teleconverter on the lens. We are still using a full frame camera here, taking the pictures, and the exe file read now 400 millimeters f11. And here is a picture taken with a full frame camera with the same lens, but this time set then at 400 millimeters without the teleconverter, aperture set to f11, and the image looks exactly the same as the image from the 2 times teleconverter. That was pretty easy, isn't it? Not so bad after all. So let's move on to crop factors. Camera with crop factors are like Nikon's DX camera, which have a crop factor of 1.5, and Micro Four Thirds camera, which have a crop factor of 2. I tried to explain the effect of crop factors on focal length and the property of the image to my wife, and I failed to explain it. I hope I will do a better job in this video. So let's get into it then. A crop factor also acts as a focal length multiplier. But how about the f-stop? If I, let's say, use this lens, I set it to 200 millimeter. I attach it on a full frame camera. The f-stop wide open will read 5.6. Now I remove that lens from the D850 and then attach it to a crop factor like this D500. Set the lens at 200 millimeters at wide open, and the aperture still read also f5.6. This camera have an option of in-body crop factor, which give then the effective sensor size of a micro four third. And once I engage that micro four third mode, the aperture value still read 5.6. So it's great then, right? I mean, we do not lose light like in the case of using a teleconverter. But plus, because there is no glass between the lens and the camera, the image quality also stayed the same. But here is the tricky part that made my wife confused. If I use this lens, let's say at 200 millimeters, wide open 5.6 on a crop sensor camera like the D500, will it then become a 300 millimeters f5.6? Because if that's the case, it means the DX camera is a magical camera which can turn a 200 millimeter lens 5.6 into a 300 millimeter lens 5.6. And I will try to show you how it works. This is the Nikon 70 to 200 millimeters f2.8 lens. I will set the focal length to 200 millimeters, attach it on a DX crop camera body, the D500. And some of you might have wondered, like, did Haj actually forgot something in the background there? No, I didn't. Here is actually where the magic works. Yeah, you cover it with the magic blanket, and then we remove the blanket, and ta-da! It became a 300 millimeters 2.8. That amazing? Okay, let's return it to its original state, to 70 to 200 millimeters. Abracadabra, and here we go, back to the 70 to 200 millimeters. And here is where it gets even more exciting. Let's still set it to 200 millimeters f2.8 and then engage the micro four third crop. So now this time it should turn then into a 400 millimeter lens, and let's see how it works. Here we go again, and abracadabra, and here you go. It become a 400 millimeters 2.8, and look at it, it's amazing. Just like that, by attaching it on a micro four third body. But does it work like that? Let's find out. Yeah, let's go and take pictures and find out how that magic works. I just did another magic to regenerate again all the lens that we need for the test. And before we go to the big surprises, let's start with this small lens, right? I'll be easier. So I set the lens to 200 millimeters, but instead I put it on a DX crop sensor camera, and this is the image I got. The advantage of this lens is that I can zoom in now to 300 millimeters, put it on a full frame camera, and then keep the aperture at 5.6, and this is the result. And yeah, look quite the same, right? Wait a minute, look at those light on the corner. look for me like there is a little bit going on there. It does not look really the same. Let's stop the lens at f8 and see how it goes. So 300mm focal length, but f8 now, and still on a full frame camera. Now looks very similar. Yeah, I know it has been nitpicky, but let's move on, okay? Let's put now the lens back to 200mm f5.6 and then engage the Micro Four Third crop on my Nikon camera. Then I take a picture and it reads 200mm f5.6, but here is the image that I got. Definitely does not look like a 200mm to me. Huh? Now let's zoom in to 400mm. This is exciting, man, seriously. 400mm f5.6, put it on a full frame camera, and this is the image I've got. Look the same, no? Now things become a little bit more apparent. Those lights in the corners are much bigger than the one on the Micro Four Third setup. How come? Lens is still set at 400mm. Let's close now the lens to f11. Put it on a full frame camera, and ta-da! Pretty much the same to me. The portrait of my friend is the same size. The background also look pretty much the same. What's going on here then? But there you go again. That's not much of a difference, isn't it? Let's move on. This time we will play with a 2.8 lens. We will set the focal length to 200mm. Take a picture with the full frame camera just as a reference, and here we've got. We will keep the lens at 200mm all the time. Also we'll keep the f-stop at f2.8, but this time let's attach it to crop sensor camera, and this is the image I've got. Let's use a proper 300mm 2.8 lens and use a full frame camera, because now then this lens is a 300mm f2.8 on a full frame body, and here we go. So, and here we go. We have the crop sensor camera at 200mm 2.8, but have the same field of view as this one, the full frame camera at 300mm 2.8. So let's compare the result. Yeah? And this is the result from the 300mm 2.8 on a full frame camera. Just a quick look at it. I mean, yeah, the field of view really look the same. But there is something going on with those lights in the corner. At 2.8, the light is just so big and round with the full frame camera, but not with the crop sensor camera. This is now getting a little bit chilly. My excitement is like starting to cool down a little bit. Let's see. So let's set this lens at f4 and take a shot. And ta-da! Look the same. The image from the full frame camera 300mm now at f4 look actually pretty close to the image from the 200mm at 2.8 with the DX camera. So although we do not lose light per se, the background actually appear like an f4 instead of an f2.8. Interesting. Again, look, is that really a big deal? Let's have a look at the Micro Four Third option, because the big question is like, well, gonna take this or this to the field. And let's engage the crop mode in the T500 to make it look like a Micro Four Third camera. Now we actually have then a good comparison between a 200mm 2.8 that looks like 400mm and the real 400mm 2.8 on a full frame camera. Here is the shot with 200mm 2.8 on a Micro Four Third body. That was quite a difference in terms of field of view. That is the 200 millimeters with the full frame camera, and this is now the 200 millimeter with the Micro Four Third camera. It's impressive. Let's take a look at the 400 millimeters 2.8 now. This is the image from the 400 millimeters 2.8 on a full frame camera. Here we see clearly the difference between the two, like how much difference the background is. The 400 millimeters 2.8 on a full frame camera just washed out the background. It's just like a plain color of green and with those big dots of light in the background. Let's close down the aperture of this lens to f5.6 and see how it goes. Yeah, look close but not the same yet, but I would say yeah. This lens then, once it is coupled with a Micro Four Third body, have indeed the focal length of a 400 millimeter lens. The aperture stay at 2.8, but the background look like an 400 millimeters f5.6 on a full frame camera. Is my excitement over now? No, I mean, come on. If I'm going for a hike somewhere, I will not be able to carry that, but I can carry this. So what is then our verdict here? Well, that bouquet of the 400 millimeters 2.8 was sweet, wasn't it? But, I mean, it comes with a premium price and also a premium weight as well. Unfortunately, if that is the look that you are looking for, then my magic will not be able to help. You will have to get then a 400 millimeters 2.8. However, if you are willing to compromise and then using a teleconverter or a crop sensor cameras, is a very good alternative for getting still a very good shot. What I like about teleconverter is that they make the lens very versatile, because you need the reach, you attach the teleconverter. And now let's say the animal approached quite close, and then you might want to remove the teleconverter, and then you have a slightly wider shot instead. However, with the teleconverter, we lose one stop of light or two stops of light. And that could be a problem when it comes to action photography, because we want as high shutter speed as possible, so we need then as much light as possible as well. Otherwise, we will push the ISO too high. And that when the crop sensor or Micro Four Third camera come in. You will have a longer reach, but you don't lose an f-stop. But your image will not look like a 400 millimeters 2.8. So it seems like, yeah, using a Micro Four Third or a crop sensor camera is then kind of the ideal way if you want the maximum reach without breaking the bank. If we use a lens on a crop sensor camera, I would suggest using the term field of view instead of equivalent focal length. The reason is because focal length is a physical property of the lens, and it does not change according to the camera that we are using. The field of view, on the other hand, take into account the property of the viewer, which is in our case then the camera. But if we like to call our lens with its full frame equivalent, the actual field of view is then given by the focal length of the lens multiplied by the crop factor, while the full frame equivalent of the bokeh is given by the lens f-stop minus a stop multiplied by the crop factor. So on a DX camera, a 200 millimeters f2.8 will have the field of view of 300 millimeters and the bokeh of f4 lens. While on a Micro Four Third camera, the same lens will have the field of view of 400 millimeters and the bokeh of f5.6 lens. But let's forget about the geeky techy part, the focal length and then the f-stop and then the crop mode, and let's forget about them, because after all, when we go out, we don't go out to walk our camera or walk our lens. We go out walking our dogs and then take pictures instead, right? Once you go home with pictures that make you happy, the camera and the lens that you used was then the right lens for the situation, right? All roads lead to Rome at the end, right? There are roads which is faster and straight than the others, but and then you pay a premium price and then you have to carry that beast around. There are roads when actually you take a little detour here and detour here, but on the other hand, you see multitude of things on the way. So I showed you the way, I explained them to you, and now it's for you to choose which way do you want to go. Just a quick note, I put quite lots of time and effort on it. I hope you like the videos and find it useful. If you have a comment or suggestions, just leave it in the comment below. I read all the comments posted on my videos and answer them accordingly. And don't also forget then to like the video and also subscribe to the channel. That will keep me motivated to produce more video like this, but also go out and take pictures. So that's it then for this video, and until next time then, bye.